bloodline, his genes. And that because of his actions. And the Bible, his very name refers to him being a rebel and a great hunter before God, which also ties into the Orion we were talking about earlier. Something with this individual triggered the beginning of this giant changing into something that he wasn't before. Changing. He became a Gibborim. Now, I also say that because of what happened right after he begins becoming a Gibborim. This will take us to Iran, Iraq, why we're there, and what's going to happen in this great deception. And I realize we've only got about probably 25 minutes. So in chapter 10, he begins to become a Gibborim, but one chapter later, he immediately sets out to build a stargate, a tower, a device whose top will reach into Shemayim, the dwelling place of God. And God says, let us go down and see what man's doing. You referred to this verse earlier. Nothing now, they said, nothing now shall be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. And what was it that they imagined to do? They imagined to build a gateway to God. Now, the connection between transhumanism and stargates here is phenomenal. First, Nimrod sets out starts becoming transhuman. Suddenly, it's as if he can see in the new modes of perception. And he goes to a specific place where he builds a tower that leads into a celestial opening. The fact that his eyes were suddenly open to new modes of perception is very reminiscent of what's being talked about among transhumanists right now, in that if we blend ourselves with animals, we can see into other modes of perception. As soon as he can see into other modes of perception, he goes and he begins building this tower. Nimrod doesn't just go to a specific place. He goes to a certain earth location, a stargate location, a place that may be hidden to us. I believe this because there are places on earth that if our eyes were open, we might see the mystical heaven, if you will. That it's not way out into the stratosphere, but it's just above our heads. And there's a lot of places in Scripture that lead me to believe that that's true. And you wonder if it's not why deep inside the human psyche we have this ancient belief system that man can go up on a mountain and meet with gods, or meet with God himself. So you have the Mount of Olympus, you have Moses meeting with God on Sinai, Jesus returning upon the Mount of Olives in the very near future, Quetzalcoatl coming down upon the mountain, the Watchers touching down on the mountain of Horeb in the days of Jared. All of these ancient records, and how many churches today take their groups and they go up on a mountain where they're going to meet with God? This is something that's deep in our psyche, but it might actually attest to something that is a historical fact, that there are certain places on earth whereupon high locations there might be an opening into, if we could see it, openings into how places where spiritual forces, angels, Jacob's ladder, where they can ascend or descend from that place that we would think of as heaven. So, Nimrod's transhumanism, if you will, may have done a couple of things. It may have made him an appropriate receptacle for a body, if you will, into which, reanimated, could come forth the spirit of a Rephaim. It may have also opened his mind or his eyes to perception. And so anyway, he immediately goes and he builds the Tower of Babel. And what's interesting about this location now, Steve, where we are, in the Middle East, is that this is referred to in the Bible as the Tower of Babel, but in other texts, this same place, this location, is iconified in other ancient sacred literature. It is the home of the Babili, the gate of the Eli, the illumined ones. Literally the gate to God in the Bible, but this huge tower, this Stargate in Sumerian, where they take and rip off the Nimrod story and reinterpret it as the Gilgamesh. In Sumerian, this is the Adamananki, the literal house of the foundation of heaven on earth, the place on earth that is connected to heaven, a stargate. So that Nimrod might have been an actual example of our thesis, my thesis. He may also be the builder of what Isaiah refers to when he says that there is this gateway that's going to open, through which the Gaborim are going to return when Babylon is invaded and destroyed in the end time. Isaiah 13:1 through 3, in the Greek Septuagint, I've quoted this before in the scripture, but I want to say something else about this now, says, "The vision which Isaiah, son of Amos, saw against Babylon, lift up a standard on the mountain of the plain, exalt the voice to them, beckon with the hand, open the gate, ye ruler, I give command, and I bring them, Gaborim are coming to fulfill my wrath," end quote. So, we have a reference to Babylon, that there is a gateway that is there, that at a time when it is invaded and then later destroyed, God is going to give a command, a gate there is going to open, through which the Gaborim, who are associated by scholarship to the ancient giants, are going to come fulfilling wrath. Now, Steve, imagine what that might mean. A full-on, open the gateways flood of giants, a literal hive crawling over the earth in the last days. Think about that. I mean, Steve, let me ask you a question, because you're the expert here, so that people can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about that could be an imminent reality. How big were these giants?
Well, I mean, there are reports of them, and I'm talking ancient reports, and from what I've been told, the average height of these guys is 12 to 18 feet. 12 to 18 feet.
I'm going to ask you something, and you just tell me if I'm right or wrong. I read one time that there was archaeological discoveries where they had unearthed humanoid skeletons that had soared to the height of 36 feet. I read where in the 1500s, first of all, there was a human skeleton was found under an oak tree in the canton of Lucerne that was 19 and a half feet high. Do you know if that's true?
Yes, and even Pliny wrote about the 36-foot tall one. The Carthaginians, that specifically was I think the 36-foot one, and there's a bunch of them, but the 19-and-a-half-footers, that seems to be, I mean, seriously, Tom, that number shows up a lot in a lot of different finds. And just so people can get an understanding of these things, they were big enough to take buffalo, full-size buffalo, under their arms and run them down. You know, when you're talking about the speed of these individuals and also the mental capacities, you know, again, people always say, well, these things are like Neanderthals. No, they're not. Their psychic abilities are such that basically, outside of the protection of the blood of the Lamb, I mean, these things can basically melt minds. Even Dr. Moldeshev, who's not a Christian, when he went into the Himalayas, interesting that they would go into the Himalayas, right? The Himalayas means the mountains of God. Bhutan means the garden of the gods. The point is that he couldn't walk beyond a certain point, or he said his head felt like it was going to basically blow apart. Okay, that's in the mountains of Nepal, then come back to the United States, Dulce, New Mexico, and a group of scientists don't take the red line seriously. The red line is where you cannot go past. Now, how could I know this unless somebody told me this, okay, Tom? But the red line is where you cannot go past lest the sheer, if you will, mental projection of these things, and I'm not talking about ones that are in stasis or suspended animation. I'm talking about live ones where basically they can just, you know, I mean, take your mind out. I mean, melt your mind. So when you get a report from a non-Christian in the mountains of the Himalayas and a report from multiple Christians who really are trying to get this information out to the people, and all you get is the people saying, oh, that'll never happen, that's just horn and quail writing another fiction book. No, the reason we do this stuff is to prepare the people, and I now understand that men's hearts failing them for fear of looking after those things coming upon the earth.